Assalamualaikum and good day to everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our discussion today. The title of our forum is Plastic Pollution in Our Ocean: Finding the Best Solution. This topic is related to the UN Sustainable Development Goal 14, which is life below water. One of the main issues here is marine plastic pollution. Our central issue today comes down to one argumentative question: which solution is likely to have the biggest impact on reducing marine plastic pollution? This question will be looked at by four involved stakeholders. To express this further, a 2025 study in navigating solutions for marine plastic pollution found that biodegradable polymers are the next step to decrease marine plastic pollution globally. However, this solution alone is not enough to counter the growing rate of pollution all around the world. There are many stakeholders that are equally responsible in reducing marine plastic pollution, which includes governments, corporations, consumers, and environmental activists. These stakeholders have a big role in maintaining our marine plastic ecosystem. To break down which stakeholder will present the best solution, we have four panelists with us to express their points, thoughts, and arguments. First, we have our first panelist here, which is Nur Safia, who will be expressing points regarding the government. We have our second panelist here, Sarah, who will be expressing regarding cooperation. Nafisa Damia here, panelist 3, who will be expressing regarding environmental activists. And lastly, our panelist 4, Dia Sharafana, who will be expressing regarding consumers. Each panelist has 2 minutes to convey their argument. So let us start with our first panelist, Nur Safia, with her points. You may proceed.
Thank you, moderator, and hello to everyone. So, my position is that government regulation is the most effective solution to reduce plastic pollution in our oceans. Plastic pollution is a systemic issue that cannot be solved through only voluntary action. Strong legal frameworks are required to ensure consistent and large-scale change. According to Zhou and Wu in 2024, students in marine sciences and law, global governance of marine plastic pollution is shifting toward legal international agreements, particularly through extended producer responsibility, also known as EPR. EPR system is a policy that requires producers to take responsibility for the entire life cycle of plastic products, including design, production, and waste management. This policy is enforced through all nations across all countries. This shows that government plays a crucial role in enforcing environmental responsibility across industries. This is also a good policy because it's important as it addresses the root cause of pollution, not just its symptoms. And also, this view is strongly supported by United Nations itself, which reports that without strong regulatory intervention by the governments, plastic leakage into oceans could nearly triple by 2040. Therefore, I strongly argue that government regulation is the most effective solution because it provides the legal structure necessary to achieve long-term and large-scale reduction of plastic pollution. Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you, panelist 1, Nur Safia. So let's move on to our second panelist, which is Sarah with cooperation. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you so much to Miss Moderator and good evening to everyone. So, while I do understand the importance of government regulation as mentioned previously, but in my opinion, I believe that businesses and corporations could actually produce the biggest impact in reducing this marine plastic pollution. So, why do I say this? It's because they actually have the power to restructure the way plastics products are produced, packaged, and distributed among the consumers. So, like when we are talking about how the world works right now, the biggest division in an economy is actually consumerism, and of course, its distributors, which are corporations and businesses. So, while governments and like other factions do play important roles, corporations are actually in the best position to reduce this plastic pollution at its very own main source. So this stance can also be supported by a study made by London Lane in 2018, where they mentioned that marine plastic pollution is actually a complex environmental issue that cannot be fully addressed through government regulations alone. So the author's argument also supports my stance earlier with a quote that said that corporate social responsibility, or CSR for short, should play a greater role in marine plastic pollution governance because corporations are among the main contributors to plastic waste through their production and consumption. Plus, since these businesses can control how their products are designed and packaged, they also have the ability to like reduce unnecessary plastic use and maybe adopt like sustainable materials instead. So like I'm not actually saying that corporations are solely responsible for solving this marine plastic pollution issue, but instead I believe that they actually have the greatest opportunity to make a long-term impact on the issue itself. Because I believe that lasting solutions that can be taken by these corporations or these businesses, these lasting solutions can actually become the key driver in protecting our marine ecosystem and also achieving the Sustainable Development Goals or SDG 14, life below water. And that is my take and my stance on why the corporations are actually maybe the biggest, can make the biggest impact in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, too, for expressing your points on cooperation. So let's move on to our third panelist, Nafisa Damia, for environmental activists. You may proceed.
Thank you, moderator, and hi, everyone. So, as panelist three, I believe that environmental initiative and activism are among the most effective solution to plastic pollution because they focus on creating a long-term behavior change within society. So, according to the United Nations Environment Program (UNEP) 2023, millions of tons of plastic waste enter the ocean every year, harming marine ecosystem endangering wildlife and even affecting human health through the food chains. So while government regulation and some corporate action are important, but I believe like these measures are driven importantly by public demand and also some environmental awareness. So one reason why environmental initiatives are so important is that they educate people about the consequences of plastic pollution. So many individuals are unaware of a plastic bottle, the usage of plastic bottle and plastic bag only for a few minutes can remain in the environment for hundreds of years. So through educational campaigns, workshop, and maybe some school program and also some social media awareness, people can become more informed about this and more likely to adopt sustainable habit. So another important point is that community participation. So activities such as a beach cleanup, some recycling activities, some tree planting program, and some plastic-free campaign allow people to actually become directly involved in these activities so that not to only remove waste but also to force a sense of responsibility and environmental awareness, which is really good in towards our cleaner environment. So like fewer some activism also serve some powerful force to actually influencing some decision maker. So throughout the history, there's many environmental policies and corporate sustainability initiative were introduced to actually make a citizen more concerned about regarding the problem that been happening around us. So therefore, while government regulation and corporate responsibility and also consumer all action are essential, but I believe that this environmental initiative and also activism act as the foundation to motivate and connect these efforts to making to actually encourage people to put more effort in reducing plastic pollution in our ocean. So that's my point regarding my role. Thank you.
Thank you, Nafisa Damia, for your points on environmental activists. Very interesting points. So let's move on to our last panelist for, which is Dia Sharafana for consumers. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you, moderator. I will be sharing the consumer perspective on plastic pollution. So, I believe consumers play a very important role in reducing plastic pollution because our everyday choices directly affect how much plastic ends up in our environment. So every time we choose to use a reusable bottle instead of plastic one, or when we bring our own shopping bag, or when we buy products with less plastic packaging, we are helping to reduce plastic pollution in our oceans. So this idea is supported by a study by Vanshi and colleagues in 2023. So the researchers found that people are more likely to reduce, reuse, and recycle plastic when they feel more personally responsible for protecting the environment. One finding that really stood out to me is that simply knowing about plastic pollution is not enough. So people need to know and feel that their own actions can make a differences before they actually change their behavior. I also think that consumers have the power to influence business. Companies often respond to what customers want. For example, if more people, so we as consumers choose environmentally friendly products and avoid excessive plastic packaging, companies are more likely to offer sustainable alternatives because that's what the market demands. I'm not saying that consumers can solve this problem on their own, because governments are needed to introduce policies, corporations are needed to provide sustainable alternatives, and environmental organization helps to raise awareness. However, none of these efforts will have a lasting impact if consumers are unwilling to change their daily habits. So, in my opinion, reducing plastic pollution starts with all of us. So, small actions may seem insignificant, but when we as consumers start to make the same sustainable choices, we can create a meaningful and lasting impact on our oceans. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Sharafana, for expressing your points. Okay, thank you everyone for your voices and amazing points that you have shared. So let us open up for an 8-minute free exchange, in which in this segment I'm going to be asking two questions that all of you should be answering. For the first two questions will be directly for the first two panelists, and then the second question will be directly to the next two panelists. So my first question is directly is for the corporation stakeholder and the consumer stakeholder, which is Sarah and Dia. My question is for the both of you is, if consumers continue to insist using plastic-based products, is it acceptable to accuse corporation for the reason of plastic waste as they produce them? Let us hear the answer from the corporation first. Sarah.
Okay, so thank you so much for the questions. So, like, first of all, I would say that I actually do not think that it is fair to place all the blame on corporations alone, because consumers also actually play a role in creating the demand for these plastic-based products. So, like, if people continue purchasing these products without maybe considering their environmental impacts, this plastic waste will still continue to increase despite all the efforts that we tried to like preserve our marine ecosystem. However, I also do not think that corporations should be free from the responsibility either, simply because the consumers are buying their products, as they actually have a much greater influence over the market itself, because they are the ones who decide how the products are designed, what materials are used during the packaging or the production, and whether sustainable alternatives are made available and affordable for the consumers. Also, these consumers, they will be choosing between the products that are already packaged in the plastic, so like their options are already limited when it comes to like the market shelf, because everything is in plastics, so it's very limited. So, like as the saying goes, we have to root out the main cause. And right now, the main cause here is actually the corporation's operations, which are producing, packaging, and distributing. So, if we root out these main causes that I've mentioned, which are the producing and packaging aspects, by like reducing the usage of plastics in those aspects, consumers will have to actually use lesser plastics if they want to keep using the product. So like for example, if we can see in our current food and beverage corporations or food F&B outlets like Tea Life or Zeus Coffee, who have actually swapped out their plastic straws with paper straws, some consumers like do maybe find it a bit annoying, but they will still have to use it if they want to consume the product. So like this example actually shows how the corporations are actually the key factor to the issue that we are discussing in the current consumerism based world. So like, which is why I believe that the responsibility should actually be shared, but corporations should take the lead in in this issue. So like in other words, corporations have the power to shape the consumer's behavior and not just respond to it. So that is my take on the questions that was given. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, for giving your answer. So let's hear the answer from Dia with consumers on consumers. You may proceed.
Okay, so thank you for the question. Personally, I don't think it is fair to blame either consumers or corporations because both sides play an important role in this issue. So, on one hand, I understand why people say corporations are responsible because they are the ones producing and deciding how products are packaged. And many companies still rely heavily on plastic because it is cheap, lightweight, and convenient. So I think at the same time, consumers also need to take responsibility for their choices. So if we as consumers continue to buy products with excessive plastic packaging simply because they are more convenient, then companies they have very little reason to change because businesses they usually respond to what customers are willing to buy. So for example, if we as if we as consumers start bringing reusable shopping bags or use reusable water bottles, or when we choose products with less plastic packaging, companies will notice this demand is changing. So over time, the companies will be more likely to offer sustainable products because that's what the consumers are looking for. So instead of asking who's more at fault, I think the better question is how both sides can work together. So consumers need to make more environmentally responsible choices, while corporations need to make those choices easier by providing affordable and sustainable alternatives. In the end, I don't think plastic pollution can be solved by blaming one stakeholder. Real progress happens when consumers and corporations work together and share the responsibility. So that's my answer to your question.
Thank you, Dia, for answering. Okay, so let's move on to. Sorry. Let me clarify that both Sarah and Dia has expressed their answer very, very fairly, very good. So let's us move on to the second question for the other two panelists, which is Nafisa Damia and Nur Safia. My question is for government, Nur Safia, and activism for Nafisa Damia. My question is, government has more power to enforce authorities, while environmental activists can advocate for transformation. So does the real progress shows more on political power or public voice? So let us hear from the from Nur Safia first on the government side. You may proceed.
Thank you, moderator, for the amazing question. Before I start with my point, I would like to firstly acknowledge my opposition's point. And I actually agree that environmental activism raises awareness and encourages participation, which leads to change. I agree on that part. However, awareness alone is not enough to solve plastic pollution. Nafisa mentioned that activism has successfully pushed governments to introduce stricter environmental laws, right? But I think that actually proves my point. If activists still need the government to pass the laws, enforce those laws, then the government is ultimately the one making the change happen. And um, campaigns such as beach cleanups and educational programs, they are valuable, yes, but they are voluntary. And so at the end of the day, people can choose whether they want to join a campaign or a beach cleanup, but they cannot choose whether to follow the law or not. They are mandatory. That's why government regulations create a much bigger and more lasting impact. Um, yes, and also my opponent also mentioned the Beat Plastic Pollution campaign. So yes, while it has inspired millions of people, the campaign itself cannot ban single-use plastics, or they cannot penalize these perpetrators, and they also cannot regulate manufacturers. They cannot set laws for these industries. Only governments have that legal authority to implement those measures. So yes, public voice is valuable, undeniably, because it starts the conversation. But real progress, to answer your question, moderator, real progress happens when the government turns those ideas into policies, and everyone must follow those policies. That's why I believe political power drives the real and more lasting change. That's all from me. Thank you.
Very interesting answer from your Safia. So let's move to our final panelist for to answer the second question. Nafis Hadamia, an environmental activist. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you, moderator, for the question, and also thank you, Safia, for your perspective. I agree that awareness alone does not automatically result in actions, because simply knowing about a problem does not really guarantee people will change their behavior automatically. However, awareness is often the first and most important step towards meaningful action, because for me, people cannot solve a problem if they do not actually understand if it exists or recognize its consequences. So environmental activism actually help to bridge this gap by educating the communities about the causes and impacts about the marine pollution, and making the issue more and more visible and relevant to their daily life. So for example, many people today actually bring their reusable bag and to shopping, or even using some reusable water bottle instead of single use plastic. So this actually show that this behavior were not always common, because they become more widespread, and environmental campaigns continuously will highlight this importance of damage caused by plastic waste, and encourage people to use sustainable alternative. So furthermore, activism is not limited to spreading awareness. Why I say this is because effective environmental activism also provide opportunities for action. So it encourages people to participate in beach cleanup, some recycling program, some conservation program, and communities initiative. So in this way, activism actually can transform awareness into engagement and participation. So instead of we do some maybe open community activity, maybe we can do a startup at the school where it's compulsory for all students. So it's really easy and really convenient for us to actually educate the younger self, so that when they're grown up they can actually already using the sustainable things in their daily life, so they feel uneasy when using the plastic waste, which is one of the ways and one of the action can actually encourage people. So while I agree that awareness alone is not enough, but I believe it is the foundation upon which action is built. So for me, I believe that without awareness, there would be no motivation at all for people or individual or corporation or even government to take meaningful step to actually protecting our ocean and also marine life. So that's my take on the question. To answer the moderator question earlier, so I do believe that this activism really make a big impact in towards the marine life pollution. So thank you.
Thank you, Nafisa Damia, for answering my question. Both Nur Safia and Nafisa Damia have expressed their answer very clearly and very openly. I like that very much. So we are almost to the end of our discussion. Do any of the other panelists wants to voice out their opinions on some ideas or reinforce their primary points?
No.
Okay, and with that, the time is almost up. We heard many incredible points and arguments for the past 20 minutes. As a moderator, I am not going to enforce a general and one single conclusion here. However, let us look back at where we started and until now. So everyone has expressed their argument greatly and defended each of their points profoundly. Safia spoke of the government regulation is necessary to address the root of the problem. Sarah stated that corporations have the power to reduce pollution from its source. Nafisa expresses public awareness would educate people on the pollution, which also encourages participation, as well as Dia expresses thoughts on consumers who feel responsible and have a high chance to think before wasting. So for question one, both stakeholder, which is corporation and consumers, both answered that both stakeholders should held responsible, meaning that not one stakeholder held responsible fully, but they both share the same responsibility. But for question two, Nurse Safia very much agree that political power has more power to control the citizens' movement, while Nafisa Damia agrees that public voice could encourage awareness, which helps by educating the community and individuals from a young age. So all of the panelists' voices are firm to defend their stance and ideas, in which I as a moderator will not come to one conclusion. Based on all of the stands, we can see that all stakeholders have the responsibility to maintain our marine ecosystem and in reducing marine plastic pollution. So give a huge round of applause to four of our panelists, Nur Safia, Sarah, Nafisa Damia, and Dia Sharafana for keeping it real and defending their points greatly. Thanks to everyone that witnessed our panel discussion. This panel session is now formally concluded. Enjoy the rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.